Welcome to Myth Madness. In the previous episode, I covered Fereydun's reign after his defeat of the evil tyrant Zahak. For the most part, Fereydun's rule ushered in another golden age. He was just and wise and ruled with righteousness. However, trouble brewed when Fereydun grew old and his sons were well into adulthood. History is full of conflict that arises when one leader hands over power to the next, and mythology is no exception. Fereydun had 3 sons, Salm, Tur, and Iraj, and he made a fateful decision, a mistake rather, when he decided to divide the world among his 3 sons. Salm he made king of Rum, the west. Tur he granted the crown of Turan, the wide fields and high mountains that make up Asia to the north and east of Iran. And to Iraj he bestowed the rich, esteemed lands of Iran. Salm and Tur were enraged by this. Iraj was their younger brother, and their father had made him the higher king of the 3. One of them should have been paramount, or at the very least received Iran as his share. Salm and Tur plotted to depose Iraj, but their younger brother was so innocent he actually offered to give them Iran, no questions asked, when they confronted him. But Salm and Tur were not so easily soothed. They betrayed their brother and killed him. And to add insult to injury, they sent his severed head back to their father Fereydun. Fereydun knew his sons were evil and swore vengeance for his dear Iraj, begging the Creator to extend his life just a little bit longer so he could see it through. A little time passed and Fereydun found out that Manuchehr, one of the women who had been part of Iraj's harem, was pregnant. Fereydun prayed that the coming child would bring about what he asked for, revenge. A little more time passed, and Manuchehr gave birth to a girl, who remains nameless in the Shahnameh. The girl looked just like Iraj, and Fereydun made sure she was brought up well. But because she was a girl, the longed-for vengeance against Salm and Tur needed to wait. When Iraj's daughter became older, her grandfather married her to a man named Pashang. This Pashang was actually Fereydun's nephew, and thus also descended from Jamshid and the earlier line of Iranian kings. Anyway, after their marriage, 9 months passed, and Iraj's daughter gave birth to a beautiful boy, who looked just like Iraj. The baby was taken to Fereydun, and the king was overjoyed, and because the boy had a clear, open face, Manuchehr in Persian, he was named Manuchehr. Like with his granddaughter, Fereydun took on the responsibilities of raising Manuchehr and made sure he did not come to any harm. He taught him everything he knew about kingship. By the time Manuchehr was a young man, he was wise, well-educated, and the army supported him. Fereydun gave him the keys to the royal treasury. Fereydun summoned the nobles to come to a great feast and acclaim Manuchehr as their king. News of these developments reached Salm and Tur in Rum and Turan, and they resolved to do something about it. They feared things were turning against them, so they opened their treasuries and brought out a golden crown, coins, fine chariots, silks, furs, and all sorts of other beautiful things. They gave all of this to a silver-tongued envoy and told him to deliver it to Fereydun. They told him to tell their father that they apologized for their past evil actions, that they felt nothing but shame and begged for his forgiveness. They claimed that it was their destiny to do these evil deeds, and that their actions had brought that destiny to pass, regardless of if they wanted it or not. They hoped Fereydun would pardon them and accept that their actions were caused by the heavenly powers, which save someone one moment and destroy them the next, and the demons who slink around the world creating mischief and leave suffering in their wake. Salm and Tur asked Fereydun to send Manuchehr and his army to them so that they could bow before him and swear to be his loyal slaves. The messenger set off to Persia and arrived at Fereydun's palace. He was brought into the great hall and stood before the thrones of Fereydun and Manuchehr. They listened to Salm and Tur's message. Fereydun did not believe it. He told the envoy to tell his shameless sons that they would only see Manuchehr as he bared down upon them on the back of a warhorse, with an iron helmet on his head and a mace in his hands. Manuchehr would water the tree of vengeance with their blood. He would come with the heroes of Persia at his side, Gaurin, Shapur, son of Nashta, Sarv, king of Yemen, Sam, son of Nariman, and Garshasp. I've covered Garshasp before at length on the pod, and incidentally, this is one of the very few references to Garshasp in the whole Shahnameh. Some of these other heroes appear in the Shahnameh, but it was presumably assumed the poem's audience already knew of their greatness. Their names alone were enough to panic the envoy. He fearfully returned to Salm and Tur. He found them sitting in a silk tent, and they had him sit with them and answer their questions about the state of affairs in Persia. Which of the nobles supported Manuchehr? Who was his vizier? Who was his treasurer? How many horsemen did they have? Who served as the army's commanders? Their envoy told them that the king Fereydun was not a weak old man like they suspected. He was not broken by Iraj's death. He retained his magnificence and was like Jamshid reborn. Next to him in the great hall sat their nephew, Manuchehr, tall as a cypress and looking like the legendary king Tamaraz, the defeater of demons. The envoy said Sarv of Yemen, coincidentally Salm and Tur's father-in-law, served as the vizier. The victorious hero Garshasp was the treasurer, and no one had ever seen such wealth as was now piled in Fereydun and Manuchehr's treasury. 2 ranks of warriors lined the palace walls, bearing golden maces and wearing golden diadems. Gawran, Andian, Shiroi, the destroyer of lions, and Shapur, who was like a war elephant in his rage, served as the army's chief commanders. After hearing their spy's report, Salm and Tur looked at each other for a long time, silently considering their options. They decided they could not wait any longer, or Manuchehr's strength would only grow. It was time for war. Salm and Tur gathered the armies of the east and west. Fereydun received word of their approach to Iran. He ordered Manuchehr to assemble the Persian army. The troops were badly outnumbered, but through patience and wisdom they could lead their enemies into a trap. Accompanying Manuchehr were the Persian heroes Gawran, Gobad, Sam, Sarv, and Garshasp, all leading different parts of the combined Persian army. Gobad went forward alone to scout the terrain. Sure enough, he soon ran into Tur. Tur told him that Iraj had had a girl, not a son. So what right did Manuchehr have to the throne? He was out of the line of succession. When Gobad returned to Manuchehr, he told him what Tur had said. The prince laughed and said only a fool would talk like that. He said Iraj was his grandfather, and Fereydun witnessed this. Manuchehr swore that he would not let Tur live for long, and would soon have Tur's severed head at his feet. Manuchehr ordered Gawran to ready the troops. Then, at dawn, he dressed in his armor and put on his helmet. The assembled horsemen lifted their lances into the air and set off like a ship rolling on the waves of the Nile. Drums beat and trumpets sound. When the 2 opposing sides met, the plain became a sea of blood. It was as if red tulips sprouted everywhere. The war elephant's legs looked like pillars of red coral. All day the fighting went Manuchehr's way, and by evening Tur and Salm raged with fury. They plotted to ambush Manuchehr at night, but Manuchehr's spies found out about the plan and reported it to the Persian king. Manuchehr's commander, Gawran, then took warriors and hid them so they could ambush the ambushers. When Tur's men approached the camp, they found Persian warriors on all sides. They had no choice but to fight to the death. Manuchehr saw that Tur had no way to escape. He rode forward and, chasing after Tur, threw a spear at his back. Once hit, Tur dropped his weapons and slumped forward in the saddle. Manuchehr caught up and hurled him to the ground. Then he cut off Tur's head and left his body for vultures and other beasts to devour. The king of Turan was dead, but Manuchehr's vengeance was only half complete. Manuchehr sent Tur's head to Fereydun, just as Tur had sent Iraj's before. His messenger was embarrassed to do this, as no father should be shown the head of his son, no matter how evil that son proved to be. But when Fereydun saw it, he blessed Manuchehr and prayed for victory. At the same time, news of the previous battle and Tur's death reached Salm. He decided his best course of action was to retreat to a well-fortified castle nearby. The Persian commander, Gawran, predicted this. He knew that Salm's castle was filled with treasure and supplies, and had thick granite walls that reached up high and was surrounded by the sea. If Salm was successful in getting there, it would be a secure place for him to stay and maybe wait out the war. Gawran decided he needed to cut Salm off. He went to Manuchehr and asked for the Iranian royal banner and the royal seal ring taken from Tur's dead body. Gawron told Manuchehr that he would take the warrior Garshas with him, and they would use these items to capture Som's castle for Manuchehr. When Gawron's Persians approached the castle, Gawron told his men to wait unseen among the trees while he went forward and pretended to be Tur's messenger. When he gave the signal, they were to attack. That night, Gawron made his way to the castle gate. He showed Tur's seal ring to the captain of the guard. Gawron told the man Tur had sent him to take over defense of the castle, and if Manuchehr arrived with an army, they should hold the castle and fight off the Persians. The captain believed Gawron's trick and let him in. News of Tur's death had not yet reached the isolated wastes where the castle stood. At dawn, Gawron made his way to the top of the castle walls and unfurled Manuchehr's royal banner. At that signal, his Persians rushed forward and attacked the castle. With Gawron on the inside and the Persian heroes on the outside, the castle was soon captured and burnt to the ground. Smoke rose high into the clouds, and the castle was reduced to charred remains, an empty shell now useless to Som. When Gawron returned to Manuchehr, the king of Persia told him a new army had appeared. It was led by a man or demon, it's not entirely clear, named Kakwi. He was from a place called Deza Gang, and was a grandson of Zahak, the old tyrannical king of the world deposed by Manuchehr's grandfather. Kakwi had come to reinforce Som, and his army had already killed many of Manuchehr's best fighters, his lion warriors. Together, Manuchehr and Gawron led an army to stand against Kakwi. Trumpets sounded and war drums were heard in the enemy camp. When the armies came together, the air filled with arrows, and blood dripped down the blades of the warriors. When he spied Manuchehr, Kakwi rushed forward, bellowing his war cry. He thrust a spear at the Persian king, but it was just about stopped by the king's armor. Both of them fought together for half a day, hacking at each other the whole time. Eventually, Manuchehr grabbed Kakwi by the belt and threw him off his horse. When Kakwi lay dazed on the ground, Manuchehr stabbed him in the chest. With the death of Kakwi, Som lost his confidence and tried to retreat from the battle, but Manuchehr rode after him on his white horse. He caught up with Som, and sweeping his sword in a great arc, cut off Som's head in mid-ride. With the death of their leader, Som's army dispersed. Manuchehr had Som's head stuck on the end of a long spear. As he paraded it around, some of Som's men scurried forward. They told Manuchehr they were shepherds and farmers and were forced to join Som's army. They were ready to lay their innocent heads before the king and beg for mercy. Manuchehr told them that they were forgiven and today was a day of justice. He told them that if they cast aside their weapons, they would be safe. The warriors bowed their heads to the ground in front of Manuchehr, and they then threw their weapons, armor, and helmets into a great pile next to the king, piling them as high as a mountain. With the death of Salm and Tur, the war was over, and there was no one to dispute Manuchehr's claim to Fereydun's throne. Manuchehr wrote a letter to Fereydun and described everything that had happened to his grandfather. He told Fereydun he had cut off his uncle's heads and purified the land with steel. After that, Manuchehr went to meet Fereydun at a seaside fortress called Tamashe. He took with him all of Salm's and Tur's captured treasures, elephants loaded with turquoise furniture, gold, silks, and other fine clothes, gold belts, and silver stirrups. When they could see Fereydun's banner rising high above the castle parapets, Manuchehr ordered his army to form ranks. Grandfather and great-grandson met at the castle gates, and Fereydun fondled his face and kissed him. Fereydun gave Manuchehr the imperial seal ring, commanded him to sit on the royal throne, and wear the crown. The evil fate of Iraj was avenged, and Manuchehr was king of the world. The part of the Shah-Nameh that I have covered so far on the pod focuses on the kings of Iran. There are mentions of various heroes that support them, but they are often little more than names. Jamshid, Fereydun, Iraj, Manuchehr are all responsible for most of the action. However, in the story I just retold, Gawron is also a central figure. So who exactly is Gawron? In this early part of the Shah-Nameh, Gawron is an important hero. His brother is Gobad, another great Persian warrior, and both are the sons of the blacksmith Kaveh. Kaveh was of course the man who bravely accused Zahak of injustice back in the Zahak episode, and rallied to Fereydun's side when he rose up in rebellion against the terrible tyrant. Like their father, Gawran and Gobad went on to be loyal retainers of subsequent Iranian kings. Gawran's brother Gobad is mentioned briefly in the Garshasp-Name epic poem. In it, he becomes envious of the hero Garshasp after Fereydun gives that hero many gifts. He complains to the king, and Fereydun slaps him down, reminding Gobad that his father was only a blacksmith. But Garshasp is descended from Jamshid and is thus a relative of Fereydun's. The king also tells the warrior it is only the loyalty of his father, Kaveh, that keeps Fereydun from executing Gobad for his insubordination. Kaveh himself, who is still alive, also criticizes Gobad for even questioning the king. He was so angry he almost actually killed his son, but was prevented from doing so. In Persian legend, Gawran is the more noteworthy brother, but you have to look beyond the Shahnameh to get most of his adventures. For example, in the Mojmal al-Tawarikh, a chronicle of Persian kings written around 1126 AD, Gawran is one of the Iranian heroes Fereydun sends out into the world to share the news of Zahak's defeat and build support for the new king. Gawran was sent to China, kind of like how Garshasp was sent to China in the Garshasp-Name. However, Gawran had a very specific mission. In another epic poem that builds up upon this, called the Kush-Name, he was to find and slay Kush the elephant-tusked, a monstrous being who had lived for 1,500 years and was an old ally of Zahak. Interestingly, many years before, according to the poem, Zahak sent Kush's father to China to find and kill Jamshid's exiled relatives. Later, when Gawran goes, he defeats Kush in a duel, brings him back to Iran, and imprisons him in the same cave that Fereydun imprisoned Zahak. So that's Gawran and Gobad. They don't have a large role in the Shahnameh, but they will appear again, so I wanted to provide a little additional background on them before ending this episode. I mentioned that up till now the Shahnameh focused on its Iranian kings, and not so much on the heroes that supported them. That will now change. Going forward, the Shahnameh focuses on the heroes, and their interactions with each other, and their efforts to support the throne. And that's all for today. As always, thank you for listening. If you want to support the pod, the best way to do that is by sharing this episode with a friend.